Good morning. This is a brief point about how we talk about the concept of Sola Scriptura. If you use Sola Scriptura in an argument to the effect that, hey, you can't understand this to be a moral truth just based on looking at reality and using your reasoning mind, you didn't find it in Scripture, therefore you're not entitled to claim that it's true on some moral issue. This is a common pattern you may have noticed, especially among pastors, especially Baptist pastors, who think they understand the Reformed tradition but really haven't read that much. They don't have a historical understanding of what Sola Scriptura means. What they're advocating there is biblicism. Essentially the claim that if the Bible doesn't explicitly say it or pretty clearly imply some moral concept, then you are not allowed to say it. You're not allowed to advocate it or tell other people that it's binding morally. Because the only thing that we can ever use to come up with moral knowledge is the Scripture. Do I go too far in exaggerating their opinion? I think that's what their opinion actually is. If they're trying to say, oh no, Sola Scriptura, therefore we cannot argue on the basis of general revelation. The word for that is biblicism. Learn the concept. If you're not sure what it means, there's more. I wrote an article a while back at christianintellectual.com/biblicism, so easy enough to identify what it is I'm talking about. Let me summarize the historical understanding. The Orthodox Reformed understanding of the idea of Sola Scriptura. This is a quote from David Van Drunen. The Reformation doctrine of the sufficiency of Scripture does not claim that Christians need only Scripture and not natural revelation, otherwise known as general, but that Christians need only Scripture and not some other kinds of special revelation. The whole idea of the doctrine was to differentiate the level of authority that Scripture has versus the level of authority that the Catholic Church had. It was comparing those two things. It was not comparing the level of authoritativeness of the fact that the sun exists in the sky versus the fact that the Bible talks about the sun rising. We're not comparing those two sources of revelation, the general, which everybody has access to, and the special, which is available only in the Scripture or in the old times through prophets or other means. So differentiate between what the historic understanding of Sola Scriptura, or the sufficiency of Scripture, means versus what you hear it being used to mean today, which is a whole different idea. Imperial ignorance about moral things unless they can be clearly pointed to in Scripture. Why? Where in Scripture do you even get the idea that you can't have moral truths anywhere except for in Scripture? In fact, if you look in Scripture, you'll see that that falls on its face, because many moral truths are available to the wise man who looks and observes. Have you ever read the book of Proverbs? It's not compatible with your false concept of this Sola Scriptura motto. In fact, I would rename what you're saying. It's not Sola Scriptura at all. What you're saying is Solo Scriptura, biblicism, and it's foolish. It's dangerous. It's one of the little tricks that people use in order to cheat when they're arguing about morality and about the ways of God. I understand falling into it because the culture has taught us it with such, well, not the culture, the Christian culture, the mainstream Christian culture has taught us this. And it's an easy mistake to fall into for people who haven't studied the historical doctrine and who haven't thought philosophically ever in their lives. It must be rejected. If you cannot reject it, then you are closing off your mind to most of what God has revealed to you. There will be consequences to that. There will be consequences to a movement. Have you noticed that the Christian culture and the Christian movement in the United States seems almost to have no immune system, no capacity to look at what is coming into it and say, that is the enemy, we must push it out? Why? One of the major reasons is because mainstream Christian culture functions on the premise of biblicism. I don't know how to even answer the question, do I respect people that fall into this trap? I respect you enough to tell you that you're wrong and that your ideas absolutely must be challenged. And there's a lot at stake.